Kindness Rebellion. Messages from the Void. Thanks for joining me for this next episode of Messages from the Void. In this episode, I wanted to talk about the role of spirituality in revolution, in change. The main reason that I even find this really valuable or needed is mostly through my own experiences with spirituality and a lot of the lessons I've learned from someone such as Russell Brand, where they see a new myth, a new spirituality, a new shared vision as being fundamental and necessary for any sort of radical or systemic change. And I've experienced this in my own life because, as of right now, if we try to identify what the shared vision or the myth of humanity is right now, it's sort of the main tenets of capitalism, which is the expansion of the self, selfishness, greed, exploitation, extraction, pleasure. These are the fundamental motives of our time. Because even if you were to tell yourself that the main function is freedom, this freedom is more of a neoliberal freedom, where it's actually the freedom of markets, the freedom of business, the freedom of commerce. And what is commerce if it's not exploitation, extraction, greed, selfishness? Because in the end, capitalism and, the mode of commerce is really seeking to extract labor, resources, and then take it or commodify it and turn it into a consumable good, and then trying to market it to people in a way that they feel dissatisfied with their current situation, and telling them or convincing them that this commodified good will be what fixes this. So we have to understand that, on a large scale and in such a expansive and exaggerated form, this is creating spiritual death. We're seeing ourselves as an individual to be exaggerated, to be maximized, and are therefore destroying our ability to coordinate and cooperate with people as we evolved to accomplish. When we see ourselves as an individual to be maximized, we end up destroying our community relationships. We destroy our relationship with the earth, and we actually destroy our relationship with ourselves because we don't understand that the self is actually comprised and built on our networks, on our relationships with each other. And we are cutting ourselves off from that and feeding pleasure instead. And we are totally devoid of any sense of true meaning or value in our lives as a result of this. And so the way that I see spirituality playing a role in revolution is mostly through our reconnection to each other and our reconnection to everything. My definition of God is pretty different than the definition that most of us have. A lot of us think of God as some person or humanoid in the sky with so much power and influence that we must obey it at all costs. And the only way that we know to obey it is based on what other fallible humans have told us through ancient texts that have been reinterpreted and rewritten in so many different ways that we're completely cut off from that sense. And anyways, what we need to realize is that this rendition of God is actually just a very rudimentary and infantile understanding of what God truly is. I'm no expert. I'm no expert on, theology and religion, but, just from my own experience and just from the experiences of others, we know that, like, trying to have some sort of human interpretation on the complexities of the universe is extremely limited. And we know that when people are trying to, align themselves to these types of values, they end up becoming very dogmatic. And if you're not becoming dogmatic, you end up being ostracized. You end up being harmed. And, I've seen this very palpably in Utah, where we have the LDS Church. It has a very, very gripping stronghold on many of us, and it guides our morality, and it's caused a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And the way that I see God is a lot more encircled, I suppose. I see God as the amalgamation of all things. I see every single thing as God. This includes me, you, even inanimate objects like rocks and this phone that I'm recording with. God is the summation of all points along the space-time continuum. And I see consciousness as the fundamental building block of reality. It's the fundamental experience of being, and every single thing along the space-time continuum and outside of the space-time continuum has this fundamental sense of being, and that all amalgamates to the conceptualization of God. And the reason I even bring this up is because this amalgamation, this totality of being, is the oneness that we really need, is the spirituality that we need. It's the new myth that we need to hold on to in this new vision for humanity, where we see ourselves as interdependent with each other and all other things on this planet. And by doing that, we expand our sense of self, and we incorporate the ecology into that sense of self so that we can live more sustainably and more holistically. The reason that I see spirituality as being needed in any sort of revolution is because spirituality is founded on connection. It's founded on a tightening of ourselves to each other, and I think to the planet as well, to the universe. We need to see ourselves as interdependent and as comprised of each other and the world, especially if we're going to create any sort of new systems that don't put us in the same place. I've heard it said, I'm not sure who Russell Brand quotes, but when they're referring to it's this indigenous individual, and they talk about how when people try to talk about whether we should be looking at capitalism or communism in order to establish an economic system for the world, indigenous cultures often see both capitalism and communism as two sides of the same coin. This is because they both treat the world as nothing more than a resource to be extracted and exploited for human benefit. And I think I'm very aligned with that type of thinking, because the only real difference between capitalism and communism is who owns the means of production. So they both treat the world as a resource. They both utilize the economic and monetary systems that are in place, and then they just decide who that wealth should be given to, I suppose, or who should hold that wealth, that means of production. And so any sort of revolution, any sort of meaningful, sustainable revolution and rebellion needs to be founded on something unique, at least outside of those two concepts. I think this is where we really need to be paying homage, and we need to be understanding and cooperating and coordinating with indigenous cultures. They are the most in tune to the ecology. They are the most in tune to systems of, accessing resources to provide human sustainability as well as ecological sustainability. They need to be included in the conversation. They need to be understood and respected and honored in many, many ways. And we have sorely failed in giving them the honor that they deserve. And I think we need to allow ourselves to open up to spiritual teachings and lessons, and connect with our own spirituality in a more meaningful way. We need to understand that spirituality must be our connection to each other and our connection to the planet, and not just a set of concrete principles that we will essentially bastardize as we focus on it and exaggerate it. And this spirituality needs to be, it's weird because it sort of has to be centralized in the sense that we all need to have a shared vision. We all need to have a shared myth of what it means to be human and what it means to be sustainable and happy and holistic. But it needs to be decentralized because we need to understand that every single rendition of humanity, every single rendition of the ecology is going to be unique when we're achieving this myth, when we're achieving this vision. So it's a hard balance to strike, and obviously I don't have the answers, and I don't know the best way to move forward. But if you are looking for any sort of value from this, I think it's that we need to reconnect with our spirituality. We need to reconnect with our oneness and our ability for unification. Because if we can connect with each other, if we can develop understanding, love, and kindness, then we're going to be able to reestablish our spirituality and build new systems based off of that. Our economic system is a very fundamental part of our sociology and our psychology. Peter Joseph talks about this in his book, The New Human Rights Movement. He says that our economic system is very primary to the way that we establish our lives, and therefore establishing our sociology and our psychology. And if you think about it, it makes sense because it's about the way that we attain our resources to continue living. That's pretty important. And our new economic system has to be founded on values that we can all share. And those values should be things that we want to feed. They should be understanding, love, and kindness. They should not be exploitation, selfishness, greed, and extraction, which is the current values that we are feeding. So we need to understand how to change our values and how to build our systems, new systems that feed the values that we all want to share. It's not hard. I don't think it's very hard to understand that people want to feed love, understanding, and kindness, as opposed to selfishness and greed. I think a lot of people will say, well, that's just how humans are. They're just greedy individuals. They're just, selfish. But in reality, I don't think that that's the primary function of humanity. I think that that's what's been most exaggerated and most fed, so that's what we're seeing a lot of. And if we actually think about it, we evolved to be in communities. We evolved to be selfless with our communities because we are social creatures. We are very, very social creatures, which is why I'm talking to you right now, which is why I'm trying to be social with you right now. So develop your spirituality through connection, and develop your connection through understanding, love, and kindness.